Have you ever felt disengaged or burned out at work? Many of us have, and the efforts to fix this in organizations like spending a lot of money on flashy events or retreats does not fix this problem. Returning guest and co-founder of the Design Gym, Andy Hagerman, discovered that designing moments for authentic human connection and building community within organizations is more efficient and effective at increasing engagement, creativity, and productivity. In other words, this approach provides a powerful strategic advantage for organizations. In this episode, Andy shares how designing for human connection helps people feel more engaged and invested in their work. He tells us how designing and hosting thoughtfully curated and facilitated industry dinners was a game changer for building client relationships, and also shares examples of the positive impact of connection experiences he's designed for client teams. We discuss how to foster trust, engage employees, and leverage human-centric strategies to activate change, even in the face of challenges with remote work and the emergence of AI. If you've been seeking innovative ways to connect with and inspire your team or clients, this episode is definitely for you. Let's dive in. Andy, so good to have you back in Making Business Art. How are you?
Always a pleasure. I'm doing well. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so I am so happy that you're back. So we had our first recording back in episode 34, and now you're back for round two. So today what I want to do is just dial into something that we touched on the bigger story of your journey that we spoke about in episode 34, which is about these industry dinners and kind of like designing gatherings. But before we jump into that, just for the audience who hasn't met you yet, can you just recap like what is the Design Gym and what do you help clients accomplish?
Yeah, awesome. So awesome to be back. My name's Andy Hagerman. I'm one of the co-founders at an organization called the Design Gym. We've been around for coming up on 15 years. We call ourselves as a strategy, innovation, and change consultancy. And kind of our founding belief is that people are the most important and valuable part of every organization. And the biggest gap that most organizations face is how to best activate those people around, the goals and the business they're trying to create. So more than technology or economics or business models, usually organizations fail most because they have trouble with the people side of the inside. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how to best adapt that. And especially in today's modern era, there's a lot of curveballs that we're facing and opportunities that are coming up. So that's the stuff we tend to work with organizations on.
Yeah. So the topic that we're dialing in today, kind of more broadly, we could think about it like community building as this strategic source of advantage. But specifically, we're going to dial it way into these industry dinners that we heard about in episode 34, and then we'll zoom back out about designing experiences and just the day-to-day experience at the workplace.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Hopefully I'll be able to facilitate us in an elegant way, but if it's not, that's fine. All right, Andy. So let me see. So I just remember in episode 34, we did talk about the genesis of the Design Gym, and building community was like out the door. That was part baked into the DNA. So just tell me about how community became part of the company's ethos, like right from the start.
Yeah. Literally from day one of the Design Gym, we didn't anticipate it. And it kind of was this surprise that hit us. And it's been a core part of our DNA ever since then. But when we started, it was literally just 4 or 5 of us came together and we were like, hey, we care about design thinking and innovation and creative leadership, and let's teach a class on it. And that was like our main emphasis, was like, how do we democratize this topic, create a safe space for some people to experience it? And that was, the core mission we were up against. We came in and we were hosting our first 2.5-day workshop as our very first pilot. We called it the weekend workout. And within the first 3 minutes of this session, we're going around the room and we're asking for introductions from folks. And I'll never forget it. We had someone who was like an SVP from JP Morgan sitting next to a 7th grade math teacher from the city public schools, sitting next to like a literal brain surgeon from Memorial Sloan Kettering. And we got like 6 people in. We're like, what is going on? Like, this is crazy. Like, when do you find this such an eclectic group of incredible people, smart people, like sitting at the same table? And it became apparent really clear. They were looking for one was like a toolkit for approaching their work more creatively, which was kind of the mission we set out for. But right behind that was they were looking for a community, kind of this tribe of fellow peers and like thinkers and diverse thinkers to go on that journey with. And immediately when the session ended, the whole class kind of stormed up and said, like, what's next? Where do we go from here? And that was like
Mm-hmm.
the genesis of community building. So we're like, oh, we'll do a happy hour on Thursday. And that was it. And from there on out was like, that was a core part of how we've built our business, cultivated community. And I think for us, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, like it's become a strategic superpower for us, and then increasingly building that within our clients to activate themselves.
Yeah. So let's jump into this industry dinner story.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did these industry dinners, like, how did they come about? Like, how did that start it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, in the early days, what I mentioned, it was like a lot of happy hours and things like that. It was a ragtag group of folks. All of us were very young in our careers, and it was really beautiful and organic what it was. As the design gym matured, perhaps is the right word, we started working with a lot more senior professionals, bigger companies, more recognized, brands and organizations. But the same ethos existed. Like folks were hungry for other folks who were approaching their work in kind of these radical, rebellious, yet strategic ways. And we first coined the notion of what we call industry night. And it's this notion of, at the time, kind of this persona we were working with was rebels with a cause. And it was folks within large organizations who were interested in sticking and willing to stick their neck out and kind of put their career and their reputation out on a limb to do work differently. And we were just gravitated towards these folks. They were our best clients. They often became our best friends. And we discovered that they loved connecting with one another. And for us as like consultants, it's not always assumed, when you walk into a room, folks are saying, no, that you're the consultant, you should be the smart one. And we're paying you money to be like the person with all the answers. And what we found time and time again is that oftentimes it's like the more we can create connection and stimulate connection within and across organizations, that's actually where some of the best work gets done. So we started holding space for that, and we started hosting these events called Industry Night, where we'd have 15 that turned into 30, that turned into 50, and then 100, coming together for these really experiential designed gatherings. And they resonated really powerfully with our community. And in the early days, it turned in as just a chance for us to bring our community together. And then I think we had a secondary benefit that kind of emerged was, oh, this is actually feels really good and works really well from a sales perspective. It's a chance for us to bring folks together. It's this differentiator that no one else really in the boutique space was tapping, that ended up working out really well for referrals and stimulating project conversations and stuff like that. So that was abruptly halted amidst COVID, as you could imagine, as doing these big gatherings. At that point, we had companies sponsoring events. We did one in Capital One Labs. We had Dropbox sponsored a series, and it was really dynamic, but COVID kind of put a quick stop to that. And we found probably about 2023, we ourselves were really missing that sense of community in the world of hybrid work and virtual work. And we were feeling kind of lonely, honestly, in terms of just like executing projects. And we decided to bring Industry Night back as a chance, honestly, like to stoke our own spirit again and like light the pilot light once more. And at that point, we had a much more focused audience we were working with, which is kind of people leaders. So a lot of HR leaders, talent leaders, some heads of like business units and divisions coming together and designing similarly intimate experiences, but in this case, also a chance to go really deep on some tough topics that I think a lot of folks were wrestling with. So that's kind of the metamorphosis, but it's always been, again, it keeps us stimulated just as much as the community that we're gathering.
Just give me a few more notes. Like, what was different after COVID? Because I know, like, for instance, travel went crazy because it was like a cork out of a champagne bottle, right? Was there any different flavor after COVID? Like, as far as like the interactions or what people had top of mind or anything? What did you notice? Was there anything different?
Yeah, it's a great question. There was a lot that was different. We were born in what I remember nostalgically as like this golden era of innovation. It was a super creative time, particularly in New York. There was just so much going on, events and community building and things like that. When COVID hit, there's obviously the kind of like panic and the moment of unknowing. But I think what we were feeling as well was well documented, this language of like languishing and this collective spirit of kind of the steam had been taken out of or the wind had been taken out of our sails, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it was interesting. So when we started bringing folks together, we almost had to adjust our facilitation style and our positioning of it, that it's not just about coming to break bread and have great cocktails and laugh all night long and share inspiration, but it's actually became this really important space for commiserating and seeing each other and kind of acknowledging the magnitude and the complexity of what a lot of these leaders were dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And
Mm-hmm.
we ended up, it's kind of wild. I haven't thought about this for a bit, but when we kick off our events, a lot of times I'll even open up with like, it's a lonely time to be a leader right now. And it's just amazing where you see, when you look around the room, folks just kind of like sink a bit, like they're able to exhale. And for the first time, I think they feel seen in a way that they often aren't in their everyday corporate settings most of the time. So
Mm-hmm.
in that, we've adjusted our experience design as well, so that it is truly a safe space. So like, we don't do any recording, that there's no sales going on. Like, it's truly a place where folks are allowed to say anything they need to. And the magnitude of topics, whether it's DEI, return to office, or administration changes, or financial instability, like, it's some really heavy stuff. And we've got folks on every side of the polarizations on each of those topics, which is an important piece. But holding space for them to just open up together and have that dialogue has been a notable shift from kind of our early versions of this to recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering, can you recall a dinner where connection among guests felt like really just special or particularly palpable? Do you have a story that comes up for you?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of the best outcomes of a dinner or a gathering that we can have is, 2 or 3 months later, they'll come up and say, "Oh my gosh, like, I've gotten dinner 3 times with that person that I met at your
Mm-hmm.
dinner that initial night. And like, we had no idea, we weren't a part of it." And for us, that's just like the ultimate outcome. Cause I think that
Yeah.
spirit, the principle, the belief that we have is that when we can stoke connections like that are deep
Mm-hmm.
and authentic, it's always going to be good for us. It's always going to be good for our brand. And most importantly, it's good for our community. And like, they need each other in this moment. So that's always an important moment. We've got folks, back to our early days when it was the ragtag happy hours and stuff, like friends who are now like best friends. We've got people who have started businesses together and traveled the world together, and some relationships. Like, it's just like, for whatever reason, that is always really exciting to us, because it cuts way past the work and the business model of it. It's just like the human spirit, which I think is really important right now. We've also had some that really stick out to me as just like healthy debate, and I think
Mm-hmm.
being able to see that modeled, where you've got some really smart people around a table who are discussing with trust and respect and point of view, but also listening deeply and
Mm-hmm.
having the vulnerability to shift their thoughts on topics,
Mm-hmm.
specifically one memory around like DEI. And it was emotional. I mean, we had like tears at the table, and people who have dedicated their careers to this topic, and
Right.
others who are pushing back on certain aspects of it. And like,
Mm-hmm.
that's just, to see that modeled in a healthy way was so refreshing. And the discomfort that led to comfort and deeper trust as a result of it was like just really powerful. And I think we knew we had something special there that was needed, like being
Yeah.
able to offer that to folks.
Yeah. Just as an aside, like facilitating conversations and deep conversations like that is rare and really needed, I think.
Yeah.
If you think back, I think in the last couple of years, it just dawned on me like this obvious observation that a lot of schools have the debate team.
Yeah.
Nobody has a conversation team. I
Yeah.
mean, are you aware of any? Like, I'm just not aware of anybody that has a conversation team.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Outside
so
of
true.
people maybe like us that we facilitate conversations, but as something that like young people are taught, like I just don't think that happens.
Yeah. I think they're
Yeah.
totally different skill sets that often get confused. There's a reason a lot of politicians like grew up in the world of debate club. And I think there's a lot of power in that, like being able to
Mm-hmm.
form opinions and know what case you're making and do your research. And like, those are super hyper valid, important skill sets,
Hmm.
but it's so different than listening and empathy and
Yeah.
conflict resolution and things like
Hmm.
that are very much needed in
Well, I mean,
today's world.
even for our work, debate, arguably, most of the time, debate is not really generative,
Yeah.
because you're showing up, you presume that the other side is wrong, and you're just there to sell your thing.
Yeah.
And there's so much more that's possible when you have conversations, especially conversations, this, facilitator design conversations, like what you guys do. So much can happen, even to the point. So are there like design gym babies? Did that has that happened?
Not yet to our knowledge at least,
Okay,
but we
so so
are.
so just friends,
Yeah.
design gym friendships, but not babies yet.
And
Okay,
businesses. Yeah. I guess I'm kind of like a baby, but yeah, more on the business side.
nice. Well, in those like memorable, when those dinners feel really good and they're memorable, and like you leave like on a high, and you notice that the attendees are just in a really good vibe. What design choices do you think help connect and delight the attendees at those dinners? Like what are you all doing? What are the inputs that you guys bring
Yeah.
that enable that? We're not gonna say that it causes that, but it certainly enables it.
Yeah. I mean, not surprisingly, we're very much experienced design
Mhm.
nerds, you know? Like I think it's built into the DNA of our company and our own brains.
Mhm.
Um, but it's a very learnable skill, you know, and I think a way of seeing the world and a way of seeing your work. But there's definitely a lot of intentionality that goes into it, which shouldn't be confused with like lots of money or lots of time, even. It's
Mhm.
just the ability and intention to like slow down and think a few steps ahead and like
Mhm.
create those bits of magic. So every aspect of the event is designed in some form. I mean, starting at the most fundamental of like the spaces we host within this, our most recent series, we partnered with a chef who we had been introduced to, who had a restaurant in the West Village of New York. And he was just incredible. I mean, from the first 30-minute call we did to kind of like pitch the idea and talk numbers and stuff, he was like, yes, I'm in. Like, I see the vision. Like, this is important. And for us, like finding a partner who's augmenting, you know, he's bringing space and food and staff to the table, but he sees the vision. And when we had our first dinner in his space, he came out of the
Mhm.
kitchen and we're like, hey, it'd be great if you could do like a little talk about how this topic shows up in your world. And he was on fire. Like, it was like everyone in the room's jaws were just dropped hearing this
Mhm.
totally different perspective. And after the dinner he ended, he's like, that's it. I'm not cooking for the next one. We're like, what? He's like, I have to be a guest. He's like, I want to sit. He's like, these are my people. I didn't know it existed. So like
Wow.
it was just this amazing, like kind of infectious energy that was really
Mhm.
taking off and was really cool. Way before the event happens, you know, we think a lot about the invites that go out. So curating a topic, like we spend a lot of time thinking about, as designers do, like the question
Mhm.
that we really want to isolate in the statement. We do research and we pull inspiration, and then we
Mhm.
a lot of times we'll mail out like an actual physical mailer packet with some inspiration that goes to folks a couple weeks in advance to get them stimulated on the topic. The invite list is important, so these we keep pretty
Mhm.
intimate in like the 16 to 24 person range,
Yeah.
which breaks out into like 4 or
Mhm.
5 tables, so it
Mhm.
allows for intimate discussion. We've tapped a lot into the power of referrals. So we
Mhm.
found, particularly for like the levels of leaders, which are pretty senior that we're going for, they get invited to this stuff all the time. You know, events, not necessarily
Mhm.
like designed as well, you know,
Mhm.
not speaking humbly, but there's a lot of stuff their time is limited and precious. And we found that like once we can have someone who's been to something or who we've worked with before, like say, oh, like they're vouching for the caliber of this
Yeah.
experience, creates a much warmer room for everyone coming into it because they're excited. They're coming in with energy because someone they trust has
Yeah.
experienced it and said that it was wonderful. So that's all happening, you know, like way before the event leads up. Of course, we've got like roles and stuff. So we've got welcomers and someone at the door. I'm usually at the door, kind of bringing people in to make them feel literally at home, you know, from the moment they come in. And then the rest of the night is we've got facilitation, we've got discussion guide moments. And the whole point of all of it is not so it feels rigid, but it's so that we've got the conditions created for the magic to bubble up. And I think that's what it's really all about, is like creating the right sandbox so that all these beautiful humans we've invited into the room can let it blossom from there. You know, like we've got
Mhm.
the fertile ground for them to germinate
Mhm.
within. So that's really what we're going for.
Yeah. What's something like one particular aspect of something that you did at a dinner that like a design element that
Yeah.
that really works or connects with people? Like what's say something that you usually might incorporate into designing the night.
Yeah. Two things that I think come to mind immediately that we've gotten feedback on at least is the seating arrangements, which is it's always another good
Mm-hmm.
output of the outcome of the night where someone will come up and be
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh my gosh, I just met four people who are my dream people I could have sat next to. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how that could have happened." And we're like, "Oh yeah, that's because we went through and said professionally or psychographically or personality wise, like we're thinking really intentionally about like the environment someone's going to sit down within." So
Mm-hmm.
that's a subtle one that always has a lot of powerful impact. One that's a little bit more tactical and specific is at a number of the dinners. I'm revealing a secret here, but I think it's okay. We will, based on the topic that we're kind of curating the night
Mm-hmm.
around, we'll send out a prompt to folks in advance
Yeah.
to send a picture from their life that like most represents how that topic shows up, or like some
Mm-hmm.
version of the theme will kind of prompt. Usually 80% of the folks will respond. We'll get these incredible pictures and we have them write out like 2 or 3 sentence stories,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll frame them and have them sitting at the table at their space when they come in. And
Nice.
so when we kind of go from the cocktails moment back into the dinner room, that we walk
Mm-hmm.
in and like it's this big reveal and you start to see these like incredible like childhood relationship pictures, adventure
Mm-hmm.
pictures, and everyone's just like, "Oh my god, like what's going on?" And that's the whole first course of the dinner is actually story sharing. But we're not even getting into like work talk. It's really all about
Mm-hmm.
connection, and we use those as prompts to help elicit like a very human element. And that just like within the first 10 minutes of sitting down, like you can just feel the spirit of the room like really starting to gel. And that's just like surprise and delight, 101, but those little
Mm-hmm.
moments always go far.
Yeah. Well, it is an investment of time, and that is something that in service of people like, oh, we have to be fast and move fast, like, etc. There's well, I mean, in design thinking, right, we're something like go slow to go fast, right?
Yeah.
And I think I've worked with some clients that were like very efficiency minded, and I think they left a lot of opportunities on the table because they're like rushing through everything.
Yeah, totally.
And to your point, it's not necessarily so much more costly. You just need to like slow down and think about some things. It's not. I mean, it's not that expensive to just like think about the journey that somebody's gonna have and
That's it.
sketch out
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
And sometimes like positioning against the opposite of that, like to your point, like
Mm-hmm.
where most people might be expecting to go fast because that's what they've felt from other consultants or partners
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. For example, for us, like for our dinners, we know for a fact that the other 98% of the dinners or events that our guests are going to, they're going in and at some point, if not the whole night, they're going to get a hard pitch. Like, here's what we do, and here's why you should buy
Mm-hmm.
us, and here's how
Yeah.
to work with us. And like slide decks are out, and you're like, all of a sudden, the spirit of the dinner and the
Yeah.
intention, the trust is broken. And that became a hard rule for us is like, it's a no pitch zone, it's a no sales zone. And we say that within the first 3 minutes of the event. So we can let people know, like, not to worry about that. Like, that's not why we're all here. And that's not why we're there. We're there to have
Mm-hmm.
deep conversation, just like we hope they are. So that intentionally around the opposite can be really powerful as well as a
Yeah.
principle.
But it sounds like from the description of your story, one thing, one point of view that I have is like the magic is in the details.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, you all really sweat the details. And I think that probably sticks with people like, oh, these guys are guys and gals, but well, you and Jason are two guys. These people are really thoughtful and they really know what they're doing. Like it's a show don't tell
Yeah.
situation where you're just showing your chops. You don't have to pitch anything.
Yeah. That's one of our
Yeah,
favorite kind of internal mantras, show don't tell, is like
yeah,
just demonstrate it. And yeah, the magic is a mandate. Like it's not a nice to have for us. Like there's got to be elements of surprise or delight. Otherwise, we
mm-hmm.
haven't hit our mark. And that's not just because we like
Mm-hmm.
creating surprise and delight. Like that's what differentiates us. That's what gets people to open up. That's what allows us to get to deeper levels of connection and conversation than I think most events are able to get to. And it's low hanging fruit, honestly. It's like it's not like we're good at it, but it's not like it's rocket science. I think most people can slow down to think creatively about adding those moments in. They just don't, you know?
Yeah. But there's so many people who are stuck on this behavior of like, buy my thing. It's like
Hmm.
somebody sends you a LinkedIn request, you hit accept, and they're like, buy my thing within 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's just such a turn off. And it's just astounding to me that that's still an MO that
Yeah.
that people like middle-aged people that should know better, they still like that's how they roll. And
And it's the norm, in fact. Like, I think it's like, it's not even like a rogue case. I mean, I think it's
yeah.
actually like the norm for a lot of places.
Yeah, but then for you all or anybody who wants to slow down and design something, it actually it helps you out because it becomes an opportunity to stand out.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's
Like,
like for
yeah,
us, it was such a big reframe of, because it can feel laborious or like a waste of time, or you're questioning, like, is this the best use of our time to like sweat these details?
mm,
One is we have fun doing it. And I think that
mm, mm-hmm,
that's important, not to be
yeah,
undervalued. Two, though, is like, it is for us in terms of the show don't tell, like, it is us modeling the same intentionality we bring to our work. And like,
yeah,
that's hopefully what folks walk away with is like, man, if they put that much into like a 3 hour dinner, you know, like, can't imagine what they would do if we worked on a project or worked with our leadership team on something. And
mm,
I think that's been powerful because we don't identify as like salespeople. You know, of course,
mm-hmm,
everyone's got some aspect of sales, but this has been the most authentic version of sales that we have for ourselves. And any
mm-hmm,
time we onboard a new employee, that's kind of what we share with them is like, we don't expect you to go out and be doing hard sales or cold calls. It's like, how do we bring our work to life in these really organic settings that models, you know, what we're capable of? And that's worked best for us beyond
yeah,
any other paid or strategic sales funnel that we've tried to stand up.
yeah, for sure. I mean, and you're just demonstrating that you can gather people and do it effectively. So I think somebody would feel very comfortable being like, oh yeah, they can come into my company. They'll make me look good. It just creates a lot of just it anchors people in like really positive feelings
Yeah.
and expectations and just knowing like what you can do. That's fantastic. I'm curious if you have any more notes around like the impact that these dinners have had on attendees, like any feedback that you've gotten, feedback or stories that you've heard from people who came to the dinners, and anything else other than what you shared so far.
Yeah. There's maybe like two things that have come to mind. One is the element of, I mean, this is always blows my mind, but even to our very first workshop we ran,
Mhm.
we started to find a challenge actually early on when we were running these sessions. This is like not to toot my own horn or our own horn, but like people would come up after the session and be like, that was the best workshop I've ever been to, or like, that was the
Nice.
best dinner I've ever attended. And I go to a lot of these and we're like, man, like the bar is low. And that's like, it's, you know, it's just like, they are wonderful, and I give
Yeah.
us credit for caring about it and putting on something great. But like, it also does from a business owner perspective, and like, you know, using this as a piece of our business, not as the revenue generating portion
Mhm.
most of the time, but like, it is just, it's not that hard to differentiate out there. When I hear feedback like that, I take it as a compliment, but also it keeps pushing me to like designing them better and bigger and differently the next time, because I know our community members' time is precious and they're getting invited to a lot of things that are still like talking heads on stage or like hard pitches
Oh
over
man, yes.
ballroom food, you know, and it's like, that's not what we want to be associated with. So, you know, that's always important feedback for me to hear, that like,
Hmm.
even as you go on LinkedIn, you're like, oh, like there's lots of people hosting events or dinners or gatherings or happy hours, whatever it is. That doesn't mean they're all good and they're not all providing the same value to your community. So I think that's important to not be shy away or be intimidated by
Hmm.
that, because there's always opportunity for different design and experience. One big learning we've had is the power of focusing our community. So we, in our early days, it was anyone who was like a creative spirit in an organization. So we had firefighters and we had graffiti artists and we had CEOs. I mean, like, and it was
Hmm.
super fun and eclectic. And we were nervous for a while to like focus that, which is always like, you know, the first
Hmm.
rule of business is like pick your target customer and like get
Hmm.
really specific with them. That took us a while to learn, but it did actually serve us. So like, you know, I think coming back from COVID, our business had evolved. So we were focusing a lot more on like HR and people and talent leaders.
Hmm.
And it was really cool to see how that shifted the dynamic of the evening, where because they're coming in with some really difficult, complex topics, like it really created space for a greater depth and understanding of conversation,
Yeah.
which was really powerful.
Yeah. Well,
We
also,
always,
also, I mean, I would also just add that those early times when you're inviting everybody, I mean, it is its own gym and you're like
oh yeah.
learning how to do it. So I don't think you can go from zero to like, I'm inviting, the heads of human resources of like 10 companies to my thing. So, so I mean, it's just like necessary part of the journey, I think.
It is, yeah. For us, it certainly was. It's just cool to see the depth of connection folks can get to, like the more you focus. And there's pros and cons on both sides, but for now, at least, I think that's been really important and valued with the folks who are coming into the room. They're looking for peers wrestling with similar things so they can kind of open up on them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just gonna make a parenthesis here just to air my own grievance on like how much I hate panels. I hate panels. It is such, and I think I read this. Priya Parker has this wonderful book, The Art of Gathering, and she has a
Yeah.
line in there. I remember this line because I actually raised my arms and I hooted when I read. I went like, "Whoo!" It said, "Panels are the most lamentable form of gathering," and I was like, "Oh my god, yes, yes, there are." Where I live, I'll spare the name of the city for now, but where I live. We really love panels here. And it's such a shame because you often have a lot of intelligence in the room that doesn't get tapped
Yeah.
into, and the opportunity to generate something bigger other than, they're there passively. It's like watching TV. You're just passively sitting there just watching people talk on stage. What a missed opportunity.
I couldn't agree more.
And just to throw some praise your way, I think this dinners demonstrates. I mean, you're bringing industry people together, which itself is just like it's so good. It's so generative in its own way. But I something else that like every client that I've ever worked with, a major problem that they have is silos within the organizations,
Yeah.
and then just kind of knowing how to do that within an organization is so powerful. So I'd like to like shift gears here and just talk about just gathering design, just kind of zooming
Mm.
out from the dinners. And so we'll just kind of use the dinners to trampoline into gathering design. Like, so what are some key lessons that you learned from designing this industry dinners? I mean, you say like no sales pitches. So some do's and don'ts, like how do you like, what do you boil down as some like list of lessons learned?
Yeah. You have a great point. It's like, it's been shocking to us actually when we relaunched recently our events. Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't even think about this when we were prepping for the conversation, is we got a lot of requests of folks coming back to us to say, can you come replicate this for our company? Like
Mm-hmm.
this is the dynamic, like our engagement
Yeah.
scores are crap and like our
Mm-hmm.
leaders are disengaged and we're, like you said, totally siloed right now. And like, this is the spirit that we need. And it's been, I mean, still kind of active, is like been really interesting. We're like, do we want to get into like dinner event planners? It's like, that's not really what the emphasis is, or like scaling that within our clients, but it definitely speaks to a need that exists there. And I think some of the learnings that are principles that are certainly useful for those organizational settings are the cross functionality and like the diversity of perspectives is really important. And that's a fine line to tune, because you need to have some level of consistency, some grounding
Mm-hmm.
with the audience so that they've got enough in common that they
Mm-hmm.
can get to a depth of conversation beyond just like, abstract inspiration. But you want to have diversity of perspective and experience so that they can like push on each other and gather inspiration that they might be able to take back. So that's a really important design principle for bringing these together. But nothing's better than when you are like surprised, or your guests are surprised by another perspective in the room to help them reframe something they've been struggling with. And that is a number one need, breaking down the silos in the organizations we have today. So that's a really important piece. Meeting folks where they're at, I think, is really important. That's like,
Mm-hmm.
as a facilitator and a designer in that sense, being able to adjust my energy or the experience or the agenda to where folks are going to come in at is really, really important. So I think a lot of organizations, I bring the organizational setting, a lot of folks are trying to address the low engagement challenge as like cool, let's do a big sexy offsite and we're going to fly everyone to
Mm-hmm.
Austin or Miami or California for a week. And we're going to do all these fun, like team building exercises, when in reality, most of the leaders are just burnt out and they're tired and
Right.
they might not want to take time away from their family, when in reality, like a really intentional 3 or 4 hour discussion, or maybe it is a day in person that's facilitated to actually get into the hard stuff and have the hard conversations, is going to be much more impactful than some big flashy offsite or town hall or something like that. So meeting folks where they're at, I think, is a really important aspect of it.
Do you think that the flashy events make people more cynical when the day-to-day culture is awful, but then they do like an event to like, I don't know, for whatever reason, just it's just more like the proverbial lipstick on a pig, but then day to day employees are like
Sometimes,
really dissatisfied. Doesn't that just kind of have the opposite effect of just pissing people off more?
yeah, I think it can. I've noticed that in the organizations where the culture is truly abysmal or toxic, like
Mm,
they're often also usually not the leadership teams who are trying to have like a flashy event or
mm-hmm.
address it. So I see it sometimes. I think that the instance that I see more often is where the culture is languishing, and it's not
Mm,
necessarily awful, but it's not great either,
yeah.
which is where a lot of organizations are at right now, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have these big events that don't actually acknowledge that at all. So that can, I definitely have negative impacts, and I see that a lot where folks are like, cool, like that sounds like a cool strategy, but I'm still going back to a calendar that is back to back all day long and a really unclear sense of prioritization, and or not really sure my work fits into that bigger strategy, and like we didn't talk about any of that at all. And that's like, so I think it's a big investment that often has a low ROI, is kind of how that converts. We also see a lot where leaders will unveil a big dynamic new strategy, and that's like, here's how we're going to shift and here's the transformation that's going to happen, which can actually create a really good spike of engagement. Because I think employees are looking, they're like, oh, finally, like, here's the vision I've been looking for. And like, we're going to go do
Mm-hmm.
this. But
Right.
then 3 weeks later, nothing's changed. And 3 months later,
Mm-hmm.
nothing's changed. And that I
Mm-hmm.
think absolutely has like a reverse impact, like a negative impact in the long term. Because the delta between what's being said and what's being done is pretty big.
Yeah. Yeah. So if somebody's listening right now and they're like, huh, I want to try something out with my team, because even, let me just step back there for a second.
Yeah.
We talked about organizations being siloed. I also been in client teams that even the team itself doesn't communicate. There's like a pocket of a team over here and a pocket over there, and they don't talk to each other. And then we come to like a meeting with
Yeah.
us, and then they're using the meeting that's supposed to get some other work done. They're using that meeting to have conversations they should be having day to day. And we're
Absolutely.
like, you all need to have these conversations before the meeting. Like we're supposed to make decisions right now. We had one particular client, they were just really unruly about that. They're just not disciplined about prepping for meetings. And then we had to charge them more because,
As
scope
it happens.
as it happens. But yeah, so even within teams, there might be fragmentation and people don't even, they're not synced and communicate and have a shared understanding of things. So if somebody's listening and they're like, huh, okay, let me try out something with a team. Let's see, like, what are two, three things that are things that they should consider, they should do, and then maybe we'll touch on some don'ts, like this, like don't go there. So let's do some do's first. Like, what are, if you were coaching like a young person, right, or organization, like what are two or three things that you would say, like, hey, make sure you do this, this, and this. Like, what are
Yeah.
some basics?
Yeah, I mean, there's two overarching mindsets, and that I'll share tactical, but I think
Mm-hmm.
one is that experience design is a core responsibility and mandate of every leader in today's world. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're not seeing your remit as a leader with that as one of your responsibilities, you're missing, both on like actually creating a healthier dynamic for your team, but also like the strategic advantages of time efficiency and trust and collaboration and creativity are all born out of that. And I think leaders are the ones who uniquely hold the ropes to be able to control and experiment with that, is a really, really important one. The other one is involving your team in this conversation and the co-creation of this. And I think that's where, again, like it's not, you shouldn't feel the weight on your shoulders. You have, as a leader, have the ability to control that, what gets prioritized and how meetings and cadences and things come to life. But your team's got all the great ideas. Like they're the ones living and breathing it every day. So if anyone has a good sense of what's working or not, like it's them. So like bring them into the conversation and let them co-design with you. So with that in framing, like everything is an experience that can be designed when it comes to meetings. It doesn't have to be a town hall or an offsite or like a dinner, like we host. Like that's not the point. It's about creating that experience. So some of the tactical like pro tips I would recommend is even just doing an audit of what your cadences and rituals look like today. Like actually just look at your calendar and say like, what are the ones that are showing up literally on my calendar, and like doing a little heat map of the ones that are going well and going poorly, and asking yourself like, can any of these be removed? Do we not need those experiences? Or are there places where I can inject a slightly different experience design to make it more productive? Some of the things that I think I see that work really well is blocking off the last 3 to 5 minutes of a meeting just to zoom out and prompt the question, like, how did that feel for folks? Like it's your best feedback loop that you can create of like, that didn't feel effective. That wasn't a good use of my time. Or, oh my gosh, like that moment where we started with a quick check-in for 5 minutes, like that was huge. Or that moment how Annie pulled out Miro and we all did like a rapid voting exercise. Like, let's use more technology like that. Like just building that literally 1 to 3 minutes at the end of a meeting to have that feedback loop is going to give you most of the answers you need as a leader. That's really powerful. I do think building in time for connection and trust building is really important. I don't think that means it needs to look the way it always has. And I guess what I mean by that is like the power of having like a monthly or even a quarterly or every 6 months, like getting folks together, ideally in person, can spark the level of trust and rapport that will last you for 2 to 3 months afterwards. And I think it's just amazing to me how many leaders I see that are reinventing the wheel every time they want to do an offsite or a leadership gathering or something like that, when it doesn't need to be that complex. It's actually just being able to come in and zoom out and talk through some of those strategic things. Doing like the pre-talking that you're talking about is like, that should create the rapport and alignment that's needed. And if you can just lock that in as like a ritual that your team's doing, that can be really powerful.
Yeah. Just side story real quick. We were doing a co-creation workshop, and there was an executive there who, and this is in a culture that's very challenging culture for people.
Yeah.
Very challenging and very financially focused and efficiency focused. And in his case, just including emojis in emails to his team, like that was revolutionary for his team. His team was like flipping out with joy just because, he just added some, just like you might do in a text message, like to a friend. And so sometimes there's, like you were saying about the dinner situation, like sometimes the bar is so low.
Yeah, totally.
That just little touches like that just can enhance the experience of somebody working within a team or communicating. Any big
and the inverse of that too, I think, like maybe it's kind of a donut, is like, the self story for our design gym team. Like we found that we were doing these meetings that started to feel performative, and this is I personally, like I was avoiding the hard conversations because I wanted to have a more optimistic and like energizing spin, not necessarily spin, but like take. And I realized, like, I got feedback from my team that we were avoiding, or at least not having, like the actual difficult conversations or the tension moments that were needed to actually push us forward. And I had to really separate, like, oh, like that's what I like to have from meetings, is like energizing boosts, like kick off the week with a bang. That works for me, but like it was not what my team was craving or felt like they needed most in that moment. And it's just really beautiful. And it took a while to shift the dynamic of being really able to open up, let go of some of those what was performative practices for many, but also like infuse more direct conversation and difficult conversations into our rituals. And we were all the better because of it. But I think, again, like that's where the co-creation comes in. Like ask your team what they need most from these rituals, and that's what you should try to design for,
Yeah. Yeah, well, we are not our user. So it's
Yeah,
like even
exactly.
so many years later, I still have to repeat that to myself. And you know what? Like again, my life partner, Amy, she's occupational therapist with kids. And
Mm,
something I've learned from her, who she sees kids with like autism spectrum or like some developmental delays, it's just like even the sensory sensitivity some people can have. So some people can be very sensitive to sound, or I mean, some people might be colorblind, or so it's just kind of being really mindful of who you're serving and if what you're designing for accounts for how they're built and who they
yeah,
are,
yeah,
and not just saying like, well, this is what I like to do, and therefore we're going to do it, and that may or may not land
yeah.
with the people around us. So anyway, just shouting that out.
I think that goes into the don'ts a lot. I mean, it's like there's no situation ever where like back to back
Mm-hmm.
30-minute meetings for most of our
Oh yeah, yeah.
days is going to be
Mm-hmm.
productive, and like we know that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a matter of like being courageous. And this is where I think leaders have the unique responsibility to like squash those cultures, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times they don't. And like that's
Oh
just we're going up against the basic nature
yeah.
of humans. You know, it just doesn't work.
The other thing that just bubbled up for me is the whole topic of like the forced fun. Is that
Yeah,
is that something? Do you have any thoughts around that?
I do. Yeah, it's a fine line as facilitators. I think there's opportunity where you can build it in, and folks are like, I was on a call this morning, and someone's like, "Ah, I hate to say it, but like it felt a little cheesy when we did this exercise, but like the outcomes were amazing." And I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
good. It's like those are good
Mm-hmm.
outcomes where you're
Yeah.
pushing on discomfort, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, forced fun is really difficult. We did maybe a really tactical example. We did a big, right when COVID happened, a big leadership summit for a large grocery company. And we had their top 160 leaders. We just did it again actually last week, but this was the first time they'd ever done it virtually because COVID had hit, and they'd been doing this
Right.
thing for decades. It's a really important moment for them.
Mm-hmm.
So they brought us in. It was the first time we worked with them to like architect what a virtual version of this thing would look like in a moment where grocery retailers. So like they were like frontline workers in the midst of COVID trying to figure it all out. One of the most impactful things we did for them was we built some fun moments in, but like a lot of times that's what clients will ask, like, hey, make it fun, make it experiential, make it sure it's engaging. We designed this exercise that was a deep listening exercise, and we literally just had folks go off we gave them 5 questions. It was like a
Mm-hmm.
discussion guide that was good questions. We randomly broke them out into one-on-one breakout rooms in Zoom and
Mm-hmm.
gave them an hour and a half to just go connect. And when we announced the activity, like folks just kind of like blank stares on the screen. They're like, wait, so what are we doing? We're just
Mm-hmm.
talking for the next
Mm-hmm.
hour? We're like, yep, hour and a half, go for it. And it was amazing. They came back and like the stories we heard were
Mm-hmm.
just insane. I mean, it was like
Mm-hmm.
folks who had realized they had battled similar family medical challenges or
Mm-hmm.
lost children at certain moments or had breakthroughs in careers or like just incredible stuff. And even to today, we still hear that feedback. We just, again, did
Oh.
another one with them and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
we want another experience like that. Like that was still the experience out of all the times they'd done it in person. Like they'd had boat rides, they'd had golf tournaments, they'd had stuff, but like deep connection was like
Mm-hmm.
really a simple breakthrough for them. So that's another like tactical, easy one that like just as a leader, blocking off an hour to do one-on-one connection like that can be
Mm-hmm.
really, really powerful.
Yeah, and I'll just put a pin on this right now. We might circle back to this, but
Yeah.
the just to make the point with like the whole conversation about remote work. Well, we'll come back to this, but I think whatever the situation or the constraints are where we find ourselves, there's always room to use our imagination and to make it awesome. I'm very blessed. I had some great friends and colleagues who figured out partially they led this and then we figured out together how to really rock meetings and workshops online. And you can do
Yeah.
amazing things. You can I mean it's not ideal in some ways, but you
Yeah.
can really be super engaging
Absolutely.
on a Zoom meeting with a bunch of people and
Yeah.
create connection and great things. I mean it's not a substitute for being in person, but if just to save on travel budget or whatever situation is there and you want to meet online, you can really rock that. It is possible.
100%.
So that's a
Yeah.
great story. Thank you for sharing that one. So zooming out some more to this idea of like, building community for organizational change.
Hmm.
So I know that you see community building not just as a change management lever, but as the best change
Yeah.
management lever. So say more about that. Give me, I mean, we've been talking about this, but give me more color around that perspective.
Yeah. It's an interesting moment in organizational development, I think. And we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing a lot of fundamental groundswell shifts in how leadership looks, how learning and development looks, how training happens. And increasingly, we're in a world of information. Like we have access to incredible learning and development and information in any form at the click of a touch point, a finger
Mm-hmm.
point. So what we're finding is like most challenges these days aren't requiring like throw a training at it or a workshop at it. It is really about helping hold space for folks to process together,
Mm-hmm.
to share, to provoke one another, and to share learnings, and
Mm-hmm.
really build in that way. So most every version of a project that we have these days involves some level of internal community building, peer coaching, knowledge sharing, and it's often like the most impactful way of creating behavior change at scale. We're seeing that particularly with things like AI right now, where there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of organizations have inherent fear around that because executives and boards are demanding that it gets adopted, and employees are wondering what that means for the future of their job, and managers and directors are caught somewhere in the dirty middle of that situation trying to figure out what to do about it. The best programs we've seen and some of the ones we build are like actually just holding space for folks to get comfortable with the tools and also speak openly about the fears, whether it's values based or job security wise, cost investment. Speak openly about some of those fears, not to answer it, but just to like name them and have them out on the table. So yeah, we tap internal community building quite a bit. Sometimes it's more informal, sometimes it's like branded, and we actually build programs around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have just like a short story of a past client, and the client can be, remain anonymous because of NDAs and so forth. But do you have a short story that might illustrate what you just shared to kind of really land it for the audience?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the example I shared with the grocer of the one-on-one conversations, like I
Right.
think in my mind
Mm-hmm.
that is a moment of community building where
Yeah.
we're injecting unexpected vulnerability into a group who thinks they already know each other pretty well. At scale, we helped, two big transformations, which are pretty well documented. We did with Capital One, the bank, and Cisco Technology is another one. So these are large, like 60 to 100,000 person organizations
Mm-hmm.
in moments of massive transformation. Capital One had committed, like, we're not a bank any longer, we're a technology company. And we helped build a large human centered design program to complement that, amongst other partners and internal amazing team
Mm-hmm.
members. Cisco, similar, was really trying to heavy engineering based culture. They wanted to inject greater innovation and creativity into the work and human centricity. Both of those we built curriculum and training programs and project sprints and icon projects, stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
the biggest lever I think that drove behavior change and culture change was actually the internal communities we stood up. So we had branded communities for both of those that became these like known entities, and we built communication strategies around them. We had internal newsletters, we had leaders doing short video shorts and stories that we kind of infused into all of it. We had other events that were totally non-training focused, just like peer connection moments to like share and support one
Mm-hmm.
another. And when you build that, and often these days like supported by some internal technology platform to house it all, it's just insane like what you can see the community kind of flywheeling itself towards creating impact. And
Mm-hmm.
with both those organizations, actually, we saw a lot of examples of like those leaders starting to then support one another. So we weren't in the room, our internal team wasn't on the room, but it was them proactively going out and like meeting. And that's like the same way with our dinners. Like our best
Mm-hmm.
feedback is when we hear that they've had 3 dinners since where we weren't involved at all. And like that same type of dynamic is what actually creates behavior change inside of the organization. It's the same principle.
Yeah. It's kind of like the microcosm of the macrocosm of like a country or society. I think the more trust there is, like in
Mm-hmm.
really lower trust societies, the economy is a lot smaller, and the partially because it's harder to transact because you're usually betting it, there's just low trust, so you don't
Yeah.
transact as much, and it's more difficult. And then you don't have institutions and contracts that you can enforce, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But in societies with really high trust, it's just like a lot more prosperous because you don't have to worry, like burn energy on all the vetting and etc. that goes along with that. But you can just like transact and like build and like spin a flywheel, like just like you're saying. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting to hear your perspective of like the microcosm, like within a company. It's like the same, people are people, right? So it's the same principle. The more trust you have, the better the work that's going to come out of that group of people collaborating.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
Nice.
prompting this. This could be a good post beer conversation for sure. But we use the language a lot, like building micro communities. And it's interesting because I think a mistake a lot of organizations make in transformation and change work is trying to create like a full enterprise, full organization movement, and
Mm-hmm.
they have one campaign and the whole company is the community and like that's the gathering, but in reality I think we've found much more success building these micro communities where like we don't
Mm-hmm.
expect it's going to resonate with everyone, we don't expect change to happen with all of them, but it with intention around like who's involved in that community, what value we're giving them, and how we help them systemically create value within on their own, kind of a self-organized, then that's usually where we see like the biggest beacons of change more than like
Yeah.
some big groundswell campaign.
Yeah. I haven't thought of that, but it makes total sense because I don't think you can, design for like 100,000 people. It's just too abstract. You just
Yeah,
got to really land it in small bits and let it's like a network, right? And just let that network of small bits
precisely.
interact and come together. Huh.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So, final topic here to land the plane, Andy, is just the power of the everyday experience. So, of course, we've been talking about this, and bridging this community building to the everyday experience at work. So, what additional thoughts do you have, if any, at this point? Because we've covered a lot of ground, but do you have any additional thoughts to share about that?
Yeah. Yeah. We have covered a lot. And I do think like the everyday experience is where this stuff's born. Like it's not from starting a big dinner series or hosting a big thing or
Mm-hmm.
totally re-racking your meeting rituals. Like those are definitely paths it can evolve into. But I do think even just bringing a little bit more intentionality to like one moment of your team's day or your team's week where they walk in, they're like, whoa, I've never felt that before. I've never thought about it that way. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
that can really create an outsized impact. The reason I think that's important right now is I believe there are a litany of forces at play that are kind of putting pressure on organizations and teams and leaders right now. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's two like tidal waves that are coming at us in the next 5 years and 5 weeks even. AI, I think is one of them for
Mm-hmm.
sure. I think the counterbalance to that is the other tidal wave that is this increasing need for connection and community. And that is
Mm-hmm.
going to be the force that pulls on the other side of a lot of the AI rollout. And I don't even think we know yet what the magnitude of that impact will be, but I think it's clear that there will be one. What that means is that I think there will be a strategic advantage for organizations who embrace AI effectively and start to figure out what that means for their org. There's plenty of people talking about that, so we don't need to. But this other one's kind of this, what I think will be like a secret weapon for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
organizations is the ones who don't get so distracted by the efficiency and the automation and the AI conversation that they forget about the human side of their business. And that can sound super fluffy. I realize that, and I can think that way, but I don't think it's actually a fluffy conversation because I think the organizations that ignore it are going to experience a continued decrease in engagement. They're going to see a continued increase in mental health and loneliness, which is going to reduce productivity. They're going to see higher rates of turnover, and those are going to shatter businesses, And I think what's the remedy for that? It's actually starting at this experiential level and like making work somewhat enjoyable again. Like again, the bar
Mm-hmm.
is low. Many of us have been in survivor or crisis mode for the past 5 years, but like we don't need to be anymore in some cases, in a lot of cases. And it takes a really courageous leader, I think, to like acknowledge that and start to think about like how do we design the experience of everyday work a little bit different? And that often does
Yeah.
start in like really micro moments. But I think it'll be a strategic imperative and
Yeah.
differentiator in the years to come.
Yeah. It's really interesting to hear that. I think I see if efficiency is another form of austerity. And
Yeah.
if you look at like country levels, austerity sometimes is necessary for a period of time, but
Hmm.
austerity, like as an MO, it's a contraction. Like it's not generative. It
Yeah.
doesn't lead to innovation. It doesn't really help growth. It's just you just end up like stagnating after a while. So
Exactly.
it's ironic that you want to create some kind of improvement by being efficient, but we end up doing the opposite when
Yeah.
when we just adopt that as an MO overall. I think even if we look at nature, just nature produces. It's just like an ideation session. You produce a lot, and then a few things pop, a few seeds pop, and then the rest don't. But
Yeah.
that's the game. That's how it
I think
works.
that's right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you look at something like AI coming out, it's like you have 5 organizations who are all trying to create, the XYZ widget, and they're going to the same LLM and typing in very similar
Yeah.
prompts and getting very similar responses. So it's like, that doesn't mean, I think there's incredible value and opportunity in
Mm-hmm.
that space, but it's not going to be the differentiator. It's just the tool. The differentiator is going to be like, how do we activate the people around these tools and stimulate what you're talking about, the creative
Mm-hmm.
connection and collaboration?
Well, I think there's just a massive amount of design that needs to happen around the use and implementation of AI that's not even
Yeah.
being talked about at this point
Yeah, for sure.
within organizations and also in the consumer end. Like, what do consumers want to buy at the end of the day? And I don't know if AI is even relevant to some
Yeah,
things or
exactly.
but something I foresee becoming more and more of an issue. We'll see if it unfolds in ways I anticipate, but it's erosion of trust.
Yes.
I was listening to a podcast with it was who was it? It was Brene Brown being interviewed by I want to say Kara Swisher.
Mm.
Anyway, point of the story is Brene was just sharing a little story around them within the last year running a research study like with scholars and then doing a parallel study using AI just to kind of see what happened.
Yeah.
And so what she was saying is that what they found is that from like the references of the study, 70% of the references were just hallucinations.
Wow.
And she said, it looked super legit. It's like Harvard Business Review, page 4, blah, 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 like the whole citation, like very confident. But it was a hallucination. So if you have, if an organization, you start to have like this volume of work that you don't know, like, is this code right? Is this thing right? Is this true? Is it
Hmm.
not? Is it like, is what's happening? Like, is this answer correct? I face that myself. Like I get it. Like I don't ask AI to do more generative things. I ask AI to help me find things, find
Hmm.
me this and that, right? Like find me the authors, like give me a list of 5 authors to talk about this, and then I have to go do it. So yeah, so I think erosion of trust might be a big deal, and that might translate to good business for you at some level,
We'll
since
see.
you're in the
I
business
think
of trust,
I think it's
and
very
connection.
much, very much a growing challenge. And again, it's one of those things like
Mm-hmm.
trust, I don't think is usually built by staring at
No,
screens. It's
no,
that's where the experience design comes in.
yeah.
That's it's an opportunity leaders have. It's not all doom and gloom. I think it's a moment where we have a choice to make. And I think that's what we'll see unfold over the coming months, honestly. Probably not even
Put
years.
on the design hats on
Yeah.
and get creating for real. Before we close, Andy, well, as you know, this podcast is called Making Business Hard, and you do have a background that we talked about in episode 34 as a musician, somebody who was, I guess, at some point in your 20s, like a member of a band. You played in front of live audiences, etc. Is there anything from your artistic life that shows up in this experience work? And well, let me just ask the question there, and then I'll have a probe to follow that up. But I don't know.
Yeah,
And if there's
so
not, it's
much.
fine. But I just
Oh no, it's actually this. I'm trying to like
mm,
whittle it down of like something that could be a whole
yeah.
other conversation. There is an element of performance I think that shows up in
Mm,
some piece, and that's where
mm,
not always from like an artistic perspective, but even like we found that we hire a lot of teachers, like folks who have taught like K through 12 or like
Mm-hmm.
elementary school and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because of the comfort they have just being on stage, like
Mm-hmm.
commanding a room and like creating a journey for folks. I think they're really inherently good at it. And I certainly feel that same type of performance thrill when I'm kicking off these dinners and like looking around and just like absorbing the energy of the room. So that plays over. I think maybe more universally though is for anyone who's been to an experience or a concert or a comedy show or something, and they walk in the room or just walk out of the room, and that energy that you feel, that body feel, I mean, that's what we're talking about. Like I don't think you need to have like complex data and metrics to like assess engagement on this stuff. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
sense the energy of a room when you've done it right. And I think like if that's the only barometer you have, it's a pretty good one of like, how do I take this existing thing or this project or
Mm-hmm.
this event or this meeting that's coming up and like turn that up just a little bit to leave people feeling just a little differently. Like that's all the more prompt I think you need to like turn in the right direction. And that's mostly what we're orienting at when we're designing this stuff.
Very nice. Well, it's time to land the plane, Andy. So, in closing, what do you have going on that you want to share with listeners, and where can people find you? And why should people
Awesome.
look you up? I mean, it should be abundantly evident by now, but it's one more chance to message and remind folks.
Yeah, so our website, thedesigngym.com, is always there. LinkedIn is definitely the best place to catch me. Shoot me a message. Love having follow-up conversations if something like resonated, or chatting more about how it shows up in our work. So always can find me on LinkedIn at Andy Hagerman. Things that are going on is like, yeah, we're just seeing a lot around these notions of adaptive leadership and like being more
Mm-hmm.
responsive in these times of change and complexity. So yeah, definitely expect to see more coming out and how we're thinking about that and trying to help leaders
Mm-hmm.
balance the very difficult landscape that is being a leader in these days.
Yeah. Andy, thank you so much for coming back. I'm sure we'll have you back again sometime
Always
down
a
the road.
pleasure.
But thanks so much, sir.
Yeah, all my pleasure. Thank you for having me.